All right, good evening and welcome to the December 11th meeting of the Cincinnati Public School Audit Committee. Welcome this evening. It's our last meeting of the year. I'd like to just kick off very briefly and recognize David Foote for his 15 years of service to the Audit Committee and to the school district. David is not seeking reappointment to the Audit Committee, and so we want to take a minute just to say thank you for everything you've done over these years. And if you want to say anything, feel free to do so.
Well, thank you. I don't have any prepared statements, but no, the audit function and the audit committee here has matured a lot since I started. We had a committee and one auditor, and it has progressed significantly, and Lauren has done a great job expanding the department and adding value to this organization. And I've really enjoyed working with this group and being on this committee and seeing it grow. And I think it's just time for younger folks to step in and carry on the torch. So thank you.
All right, thanks, David. We've got a fairly decent sized agenda, so we'll kind of get into it. I'm going to hand everything over for the moment to Board Member Craig to handle the opening discussions around the chair appointments for 2025.
Yeah. So we have had the pleasurable year with Dan and Liz in our leadership positions, and we want to make sure that we recognize those and appreciate it, but also give opportunities for those who might want to step into leadership roles as we come into the new year. And so, again, recognize we have our chair and our vice chair that we would have to reappoint for the upcoming year. So first off, are there anyone who have interest or who would like to nominate anyone into the chair position? Again, recognizing Dan was in this currently, but anyone is able to express interest or nominate someone who we believe would have an interest?
I think they're doing a wonderful job.
Yes, can I nominate Dan? Sure.
I second.
Are there any other nominations or anyone else? Okay.
I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't at least say that and I don't want to put Liz on the spot, but I think there was some hope that the vice chair would ultimately move into the chair position. And I think Liz, I don't want to speak for you, but I don't think she has a desire. So I was hoping that would be the ultimate succession here. But I'm certainly happy to continue on, and thank you for the nomination. But I do have some interest at some point of not being the chair, and I think I have some interest in making sure there's succession and that there's leadership that is at least relatively consistent over periods of time, so that we're not losing, future institutional knowledge in these roles. So, and that being said, thank you for the nomination, and I guess do I have to formally accept?
Yes.
Okay. I thankfully accept the nomination.
Okay. So I guess at this point we would do we just certainly do a vote, I guess. Again, I don't know that it necessarily has to be a surprise on this one, but I think Lauren, is that correct?
Yep. So we have essentially the motion by Paul, the second with Carol, and then we can do a roll call vote if that's agreeable. Wonderful. So we'll just start at the top. Dan.
Yes.
Liz.
Yeah.
David.
Yep.
Kevin.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Carol.
Yes.
Mr. Craig.
Yes.
And that's everyone. Thank you.
So the other position is for vice chair. And, again, I think this is an opportunity to support and bring some new voices if others would like to join into the conversation. I think I know some folks may have expressed interest. And so I, again, want to open up for any nominations for vice chair.
I would like to nominate Clarice. She's not here tonight. I think she's with family, expecting a grandbaby, I believe. So I have traded some emails with her, and she is interested in the taking up the vice chair position if the group would have her.
All right.
I would second that if she has the interest.
Is Liz no longer interested in the role?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
All right. Again, given we have a motion and a second and at least an expressed interest in it to the chair. I think we can call for a vote on Clarice.
Wonderful. Dan Holdhouse,
Yes.
Liz Guthridge. David Foote,
Yes.
Kevin Hoffman,
Yes.
Paul Kitzmiller.
Yes.
Carol Mitchell Lawrence.
Yes.
Brandon Craig,
Yes.
Ben Lindy.
As Mr. Craig says, it's a good idea. Yes.
It's a great idea. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We are going to postpone into our February meeting new member appointments. We've audit committee members, you do have the applications of those four that applied. We need a little bit more time to vet these and interview. So please do review these in the coming weeks. I'll be scheduling some interviews, and anybody who has an interest in being a part of the interview process, let me know. Not necessarily putting you on the spot here in the public meeting, but if you have interest and want to just send me a note, I can include you, and I'll of course include Clarice to have these interviews, and we'll come February, we'll have folks to more thoroughly discuss and appoint or vote on to submit to the board for appointment to the audit committee for 2025. And the one final appointment matter is the reappointment of Paul Kitzmiller for another 3-year term. So I would entertain a motion to reappoint Paul to another 3-year term.
I motion.
Thank you.
Second. Oh, sorry. Second.
All right, and then Lauren, can you do
Yes.
roll call vote?
Roll call vote. Dan Holdhouse,
Yes.
Liz Guthridge. David Foote,
Yep.
Kevin Hoffman,
Yes.
Paul Kitzmiller.
Yes.
Carol Mitchell Lawrence.
Yes.
Brandon Craig,
Yes.
Ben Lindy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we can move on to something we haven't done in a number of years, and that's talk about our charter. Eve is probably screaming at us right now, but it has been a number of years since we updated the charter. And so we've got a couple items there in our packets. There are a number of highlighted passages in the charter. The first on page 1. There's a level of ambiguity with some things in our charter. And it currently is written as no more than 10 members. It's unclear as to whether that's 10 community members or 10 community plus the 3 members of the board. So we would like to consider clarifying that to say no more than 10 community members. So there's a little bit more clarity there on how many folks we are in fact needing to add. There's also a question as to whether we should put a specific mandate that members actually physically reside in the school district boundaries. That was put in place a number of years ago. The fact of the matter is it is increasingly hard to find members that want to serve, that live in the city, in the district boundaries. So those are the 2 high level topics that we would like to discuss as a group. Ultimately, we are looking for feedback, discussion, and then Lauren has a couple other more administrative items that she wants to go over in terms of our responsibilities. So the objective here would be to discuss those main 2 items, anything else that Lauren has on her list. And then certainly take more time if we need to leave this meeting and digest the responsive roles and responsibilities a little bit more, and then come back to a February meeting where we would conclude on this as a group, vote to approve it for then ultimately be moved up to policy, then moved up to the board for full approval. We want to be thorough here because this is a lengthy process that does take up the board's time. And so we don't want to only submit one change and then 6 months later ask for 2 or 3 more changes. So we want to be thorough here. So I'll first open it up to the floor to talk about the first passage highlighted in yellow on page 1 of the charter around clarifying not more than 10 community members instead of just saying members.
And also just, I think part of the reason we want to clarify that is on the second page. I think maybe this was unintentional, but we mention a minimum of 8 members, which I think maybe is limiting, and that we fall below during the term, we might run into issues there. So the intent was maybe to cap it at 10 community members, just clarify that, but then also remove that minimum so that we have more flexibility.
Yes, thanks for clarifying. I missed that part. So that's on the top of page 2, highlighted. Any concerns, thoughts?
I have no concerns. I think they're both, I think those are good ideas.
Okay. All right.
Real quick, Dan, though.
Sure.
We're adding all members must reside in the boundaries.
No, that's the second question. We'll move to that here in a
Okay,
second.
perfect.
Yeah. So if there's no questions about the number of the composition of the committee, the second piece here is again at the bottom of page 1. All members must reside within the Cincinnati City School District boundaries is currently in the charter. And the question is, do we consider striking that? Do we consider loosening that to that's a preference, or that's something to be considered when we are vetting candidates? At the end of the day, you could have someone that lives 5 feet inside of Kentucky or 5 feet inside of Norwood that does have a passion for public school, and they might have gone to Cincinnati public schools, and they may be an active contributor in the business community and could be a strong contributor to this committee. But under the way that the charter is written today, they would be precluded from being able to participate. So I'd like to open that up for discussion. That's probably a little bit more of I think we'll probably have more discussion here than on the first item.
I guess my first question would be, what does the board think? Because does the board have any concerns about that? Because the last thing I'd want to do is us get comfortable with something presented to the board and the board strike that down. The second thing I would say, if we're worried about restriction of that, we could also think of, instead of fully striking that, think of ways, like you said, preference, or maybe opening it up, saying, there are people who live outside of the district who have kids go to school here that maybe, legally, of course, that maybe that's a way of opening it up some. Because I think part of the reason that's probably in there is to show a vested interest in school district. And not saying that if you lived in Norwood or Kentucky, you wouldn't have an interest in the school district, but maybe we're trying to force more vested interest rather than just interest in it. It's just my 2 thoughts.
I was just going to ask a couple questions, and please forgive me if this was covered earlier. I know I came in a few minutes late, but have there been particular people who have come up in the past where, gosh, we wish this person could join, but they've been, precluded because they lived outside CPS?
We have had applicants. Lauren probably has more details if she can dig those up, I'm sure, if we need to, that we have had to preclude. And we do have a current member who is on the committee who did move to Kentucky. Seth Harmon. So this came up in light of that, but then also we have had those prior applicants. So it seems like a good time to talk about the requirement.
And are we short on people?
I wouldn't say we are based on the minimum 10 or the maximum 10. When we do ask for applications, there are very few that do in fact ultimately apply. We do have 4, which is probably the most we've ever had in one cycle.
Yeah, like when I've shared this on LinkedIn, for example, I've been careful to call out, share with your interested network. However, they must reside within the district. And I did get a few LinkedIn messages. Oh, I'd be interested. And my quick, easy response is, oh, are you a CPS resident? And if they're not, that kind of ends the conversation. So I think they're out there. I think we've just been clear to broadcast it so people don't take the time to apply and then find out they don't in fact qualify. So that's kind of been my experience.
I will just note with all humility that if anybody watched Monday's board meeting, I'm the last board member you should ask if you want to know what the rest of the board is going to do. So you can ignore everything that I will say. But my perspective is that diversity is good. Getting perspectives from outside people is healthy. I also think it's really important that some critical mass have skin in the game. And so you could solve that in lots of ways. You could say preference. You could say at least half or at least 2/3. But again, I would ask every other board member other than me. Thank you.
Yeah. Also to share, I think there's 2 maybe factors that I think would be helpful in looking at it. And one is kind of looking at preference language and or having some direct either living in the district, working within the Cincinnati Public Schools district area or work, or something that would say you have been connected to the area for which the district covers as part of your being on or joining the board or joining the audit committee. I think the other question becomes also your status as staying on the audit committee. So there may be a difference between how you would treat someone who's first joining versus someone who is now that they're here and something may change. What are the grounds for which they would no longer be eligible to be a committee member? And those 2 things may be slightly different for some folks. I think that's the one thing to think about. I think the other thing that I think as a board we would say is it more than likely at the time that it was entered, and I wasn't on the board at the time that it was created, this particular part was created. There was an interest in making sure that the audit committee had a focus around, at least is from what I've been told, had a focus or were invested in the school district in some form or fashion, but also had a focus on how the district operated and like at least had some type of understanding the district existed and what was connected to the district. I don't know that that's so much the case that is the same needed interest now in the same way that it was then. Right, because when you're starting it or when you're initially putting this in and creating a committee, you may have a more vested interest in having folks on there who actually understand the district, they actually experience the district, have actually, put some dollars into the district kind of idea, versus now where you're now looking also the role of the committee. The role of the committee may be slightly different from when it first added in. And so the need to have someone who's that in tune to what's going on in the district beyond just being on the committee may not be as necessary. So I just think those are factors to think about. But I'm not sure that I can sit there and tell you what the board will or will not do in that end of the deal either. We do have the policy committee chair who would say when we would bring it up in discussion at the present moment. But I think there may be some interest from some board members that would have that concern with just what is the person's buy-in to the district if they're not a resident at some point or not somehow connected to. But I don't know that there'd be a absolute against the idea of if we gave a preference or if we made it some form of distinguishing for folks who have so many of the board members or had to be a resident or something to that, or so many of the committee members had to be a resident or something to that effect.
So question, as a board member, do you need to be a resident in order to hold a position?
Well, so we're elected.
I know.
In order to run for office, we do.
I get it.
And I'll say this, there are certain positions within the district where that is a requirement that they are, but that is very few. So, I mean, most of our teachers don't live within the district. Many of the staff don't live within the district. It's not to say that we don't encourage people to use us and move in and that kind of deal, but it's not a absolute mandate for many of the positions outside of some of our really top level positions.
I don't think it's even required for the superintendent. We just put it in the contract often that they have to live in the district.
Yeah, I think it's something we've applied to the superintendent's contract for the last probably like 4 or 5 superintendents, if not more. But I don't know that it's in some of the other senior leadership positions. Is it a requirement?
So I think that there should be a vested interest in the person living in the community. But I think we could get around some language. Maybe it's also working, like you're paying taxes, that there's some investment that you have. I also think, are we really building relationships with our business communities so that we have a bank of people that we can tap into, as opposed to just putting, things out there on LinkedIn, that maybe we could get maybe some more buy-in if we are starting to build those relationships with our corporate community partners, to get someone, some people, some volunteers to come, especially a lot of them have auditors in the companies that would be helpful to the committee and to the board. So that's just my opinion.
The only thing I would add about, as somebody who was a former auditor and who works in a business here in the city, there are some guidelines that businesses set up that prohibit you at times from being a part of things like a government entity. And I know we're probably in a hazy area as to whether this audit committee would fall under the definition of a government entity, but I would probably bet CPS does. And many public institutions, it has to go really high up. Like when I worked at Fifth Third as an audit person, I had to go to the head of audit to get approval to do that if I wanted to join certain boards and things like that. So it is tough to do that depending on some of those things. But I, as a former auditor and an audit committee person, I think having more auditors would be great. But I also value somebody like you who may not have that audit background, who thinks things differently than me. If we have groupthink, we're going to fail.
Yeah. And I totally agree with that. I've been involved on the other side of audits, so I have a different perspective, right? I've sat in the payroll department for my whole career, so I have a different perspective also from that perspective. So I think that diversity of thought, I wasn't at the meeting, I was in Texas watching the Bengals win. So I missed the meeting, but Mr. Lindy, I think diversity of thought is great. If you are not thinking like everybody else, that's great to have that. So that's just my opinion.
Make sure I get your phone number after this meeting.
Just add one other thought onto it, is that we could also do something like proximity too. So like if you had in the district or within so many miles of the district, that may keep some folks who might be, like literally if you move to Norwood and you were like across the street from CPS, I think it's a little weird for us to be like, you have no invested interest in the district, or if you're in Northern Kentucky in some ways. Now, if you move to Florida, like that's a little bit different. And like, there's an expectation that's like folks who have moved so far past or so far outside of the district that, yeah, even if they had a strong interest and strong love, they're just not committed in the same way to the things that would be affected by it. But with so much of the city connected to each other, even when they're not in the same communities per se, but are right next to each other, I think it'd be fair, like if you lived pretty close to or within a few miles of, that may be another way to phrase the language out.
And to build off of that, we did have a member leave and move to Chicago 3 or 4 years ago, out of state. So they stopped serving on the committee. That was obviously way significant distance away. So moving to Covington, I think that, we're thinking about that, and that's where this is all coming from. I would be in favor of, removing the sentence here and then drafting some sort of language that describes the diversity in background, profession, fill in the blank of whatever we want to include there. We do think through those things as we vet candidates. We have done that, whether that's prescribed in the charter or not. That has been a focus of ours. So, and then maybe we have something with preference to living in the district, however, would consider someone that didn't live in the district as long as they lived within so many miles. Any further discussion on this specific item?
I think specifying a number of miles is maybe a little bit too limiting, just because I feel like you're always gonna have maybe that person that's just over the line. And I think the purpose maybe to take that out is to increase flexibility. I agree that I think members should have an interest in the district, and in a perfect world, if you had an excess of candidates, I would say my preference would be to keep it as a requirement. But in the absence of that, I don't want us to, lose that diversity of experience or someone that might have like very relevant experience. So I think maybe just, including it as a preference, and that way that gives us more judgment to say this person maybe does or does not have an interest in the district based on where they live and work. And the other thing too is because members are required to appear in person and vote, I think that would eliminate naturally, because I think it was during COVID when we had the member move out of state. And so we were allowed to vote virtually, but now that we're always in person, I think you're naturally only going to get people that live somewhat close. But I still think it would be nice if they live, work, have kids here. I think we should still have that as a preference, but maybe just not a hard stop on any individual person for that reason.
Okay. We'll craft some changes to this and present it back to the committee in February for either final tweaking or voting on that. Lauren, can you take over on the other items you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, just as Chair House said, with our opportunity to make our edits and ideally making them all at once, I have included along with the charter document a spreadsheet of sorts that's been printed off that essentially takes all of the responsibilities. So the what become, I guess, our final 2 pages of this document. This is how we make our work plans for each of our meetings. So the question I have and the ask that I have is for you to review not only the items listed in bullet point format within the charter itself, but also glancing through and seeing how we attempt to cover them throughout the year. I think we likely do a better job of covering certain items than others. And the benefit is we can either have a more concerted effort to really talk about these things moving forward, or alternatively, we could edit them to maybe fit our reality and our focus as well. So just wanted to draw your attention to this is our approach of how we attempt to cover every item, and also our opportunity to ensure we are aligning our charter with our reality. Thank you.
All right. So if everyone could do that before the February meeting, we'll have some feedback during that meeting, and we'll be able to submit to the policy and to the board, an updated charter at that time, hopefully. The final item, very quickly, is our 2025 meeting schedule. Lauren, would you mind kind of going through your thought process on the tweaks that you made to this?
Absolutely. So what you see before you is just a proposed schedule. The board will set all of the committee members, so the board members per committee, as well as their 2025 schedule in the early months of the year, typically in the January timeframe. However, we are often asked what our preferred meeting cadence and schedule is for audit committee and wanted to seek your feedback in advance, so we're prepared for that. So the thought process here is you'll see a little bit of an adjustment compared to what we have always done. Our historical approach is 6 meetings a year taking place every other month. However, our audit committee charter only requires us to meet 4 times a year. Anything beyond that is at our discretion or at the audit committee and board's discretion. So the proposal that you see here actually consolidates essentially the June and August meetings. So with some careful thought and consideration, we find ourselves in the June timeframe, struggling to have all the information necessary, whether it's the upcoming year's budget or priorities, to have that all set by the end of June. And so by moving into a few weeks into July, we'll be a couple weeks into the fiscal year and a little bit more solid on what our strategic approach is for the year. And then on the other side of that, rather than meeting in August, again, consolidating that to a July meeting, often it's a first month or first couple months into our plan. And typically what we say is we're working on it. There isn't a lot of notable, tangible things to share. So that's the thought process, is consolidating the June and August meetings into a single July meeting to kind of knock out the upcoming year's plan and touch base at that time. So the rest of the meetings still follow the same cadence, with being on a Wednesday, 4:30 to 6, towards the end of the month on an every other month cycle. Again, aside from that, what becomes no meetings in May and June and no meetings in August and September. So happy to answer any questions or further explain.
I have a question. Do you think that I presume because you came up with this suggestion, do you feel like mid-July is enough time for you to, I was just trying to look and see, what we normally do at the July and August meetings. And I didn't know if, for your purposes, if you're like just starting the fiscal year, do you need a meeting before the end of the fiscal year is there anything that we approve in terms of the plan that you need to start on July 1?
Yeah, great question. So our goal always is to complete the current fiscal year's projects by the April meeting, because from our standpoint, we really need to transition from that work and get into the risk assessment and planning for that upcoming year, so we can be ready as close to as possible that July 1 start. From a logistics standpoint or authority standpoint, I don't know that we need approval before July 1st, before the fiscal starts, since we have kind of our own discretion as to what our plan covers. So essentially, it'll just postpone or expand rather our planning and risk assessment period, which we would greatly utilize and appreciate a couple more weeks to get that fine tuned. It's always a mad dash, it feels, to get it by the June meeting. And it wouldn't compromise us as we move forward either.
I guess my only question is, would it be preferable at all to skip May, June, July altogether and keep an August meeting? Just if that gives you, if you're already feeling rushed, maybe if that gives you more time. But I also know that is typically right around when school's starting. So there's a lot of other things going on then too.
Yeah, that was kind of our thought process, is staying in that July timeframe if at all possible. So if we move back a week or so, that would still, I think, avoid the busyness that ensues come August. So I think our goal would be within the second, third, fourth week of July would be the preference if possible.
And if that works better for you, I completely support that. Yeah.
try not to belabor this, but just another thing to think about is that July is typically vacation time. So I would, and certainly if it happened this year and we tweak it next year, but if there was the unintended consequence of half the committee is on vacation in July, then maybe we rethink it next year.
And if we're all kind of on the same page and the board office and board members are comfortable, if it comes to it where we set this date, as it approaches, we see that conflict, perhaps we could reschedule. Sometimes we'll do that with committee meetings. Let's push it back a week or adjust the day of the week potentially.
Yeah, that's a pretty common practice for our committees as a norm too. If we have to move it for other conflicts or if something else is happening. The only thing I would like maybe raise some thought on, and this is more in regards to what we use the meetings for, not so much the dates and the number of meetings, is that, for instance, the July meeting may be something that more information is shared at than typically would have been shared at the June meeting or in the August meeting individually. So like in some ways we may just thinking about that of how we allocate what gets shared at each of those scheduled meeting dates. Just because in theory, there may be some information or there may be more information that needs to be done in April to allow for more time afterwards. So just thinking about that from a planning framework.
That's such a good point. And I think there's an opportunity to further engage the committee and board members about what goes into the risk assessment and plan. So whether that's it's always tricky because at the April meeting, we're so focused on the completion of the last year's plan that we truly haven't shifted gears yet. But if there is an opportunity where, well, of course, we send out our surveys, but perhaps a subgroup or a few people who maybe feel comfortable in speaking for the committee members would be willing to meet with us for a small working session in between, that could give us an opportunity, and then we could share more volume wise in the July meeting as well. I really like that thought process.
The other thing that I like about that is that if we are going to eliminate a meeting, then having an additional ask of, please, can you come to a working session isn't so much of a big ask. And that goes not only for the risk assessment, but also for some of the other things that we're going to talk about in the coming weeks, months, year around how the committee can help the board with the strategic initiatives as we go into 2025.
I think too, as we are reviewing the charter and our responsibilities, that would be a very good time to think about what we're doing at each meeting and just, kind of combine those two tasks of, is this the right time of the year? And is this something we need to keep doing, or should we, move it? So as you are reading through that, maybe also be looking at this calendar and thinking about, does all that make sense, and what would naturally shift either forwards or back if we eliminate that 6th meeting?
Also, I think we have some levy renewals coming up this year. And so we will be meeting on October 15th. That will be the first and only meeting before we vote, that you all will have access to us to have any type of planning or help in any kind of way to get the word out. So would that be a concern?
Well, we have a preview of something coming slightly later, but I think we would be asking of the committee, at least a subset of the committee, to be a part of the full levy process. So I think we would be updating you all prior to then along the way. Our hope, in theory, actually, we would have to have it done before we would like to have it done before that July meeting. And quite honestly, we could know what we're going to ask for probably somewhere around that April meeting, so that we're creating a process for the audit committee to be a part of that and be informed in that. And so I think that's where we would be asking, even whether it's a subset of the committee or a few volunteers or whatever, to be a part of some type of active engagement around how we message out and full support for the levy. I should say the renewal of the levy.
And I guess as we're thinking about allowing people on the committee that don't live in the district, when you have those subset committees, I think that's when it really would be important that at least those people who are being selected for that has a vested interest in being on those type of committees as well.
Okay, any further comments or discussion? All right. Move on to district strategy and financial discussion. Maybe Jen or board member Craig.
So I will take the lead on this, and then certainly Jen can add in as any details that I miss. I think you have some materials and stuff that's going on. I won't spend too much time on those materials. I do want to certainly call the attention to our 5-year forecast and some of the other things that we've offered out. But I actually want to start with the first thing that we were going to do is just highlight some things that we think would be effective things for the committee to be supportive of the district and supportive specifically of some of the goals that we are continuing to work through. And so the first one is our wonderful treasurer has decided that she no longer can stand us. No, but that she's made a decision, and as much as we cry about it every day, we have a search started. It is, I believe, we have a the official form or official, what is it? I'm trying to think of the word.
Profile.
Profiles out there that'll be going out and be shared out with the different communities. We would love to have some support from some of the many members of the audit committee in that process. And that includes at least at some level helping us interview and talk to and giving us some evaluation of potential finalists for the position. This is a very unique role in our state or very unique role at the district because of the state of Ohio and the fun things that the state of Ohio requires and mandates on treasurers in that role. And so the need for license and other things are important, but I think there are a lot of other skill sets that the audit committee could also be a good help in evaluating for this particular candidate. So the job description's out. I believe everyone has the job description, but we'll be certainly communicating out on a regular basis as to trying to draw interest. The timetable right now is that the position will be open until about the end of January, about the third week of January. And then we would be looking to review candidates somewhere in February. The second thing, and this goes into your question earlier, Carol, the hope is that we would have a subset of the committee that would be able to work with us with regards to the levy. There are some important decisions that we're going to have to make as a board and as a district as to what are our needs of a district. And we recognize, for instance, our preschool promise has been substantially successful, and that's wonderfully great. And it's more successful than we planned. So there's some thoughts we have to do around that. There's some other issues with regards to how our district operates and some of the operating needs that we may have to address through the levy. But all of that also goes into, we need folks who are in the community who can kind of give us a helpful hand or helpful knowledge as to how to both best present it and communicate it out, but also provide the support with regards to kind of cheerleading it through some of those discussions or introducing opportunities for us to cheerlead it through the discussion. I think this is a really important thing this year, given that we're again seeing our state is not exactly, showering us with new dollars. And so we've talked about it before, but we're receiving a lower percentage share from the state than we had the previous year, and that it's not likely to change anytime soon. So things like these things the levies are really important. So we would be looking to try and find either some type of subgroup or subset to kind of work with our levy planning folks and to really be helpful to bring some of outside voice to that conversation. And then the third one is really something the treasurer and I talked about just about an hour ago, but is also to provide, so again, like another subset of a group to work with as we transition the new treasurer into the role, working with the committee itself to identify, or the treasurer's operations the treasurer's office operations to just identify areas that we can see potential opportunities to look at, either new skill sets, new ways of developing, opportunities for growth. Again, it's really an opportunity to put the new person in that role on the best foot as they go forward. And I think it is each of you all bring unique perspectives and great backgrounds that may be very helpful for someone going into their role, trying to assess what the needs of their team might be, what the strengths of their team might be. And, quite honestly, it's just the role of the treasurer is such a overcompassing, it hits so many different areas, and it's very similar to what we think about with regards to like the superintendent's role as well, that there's so much that needs to be touched on and tapped on. Anyone coming to that role new, it's just may be helpful to have some folks to help that new person transition. And so those are kind of the three things that we discussed and we thought might be things that the audit committee could be helpful in supporting as we go forward. Jen, did I miss anything?
Nope, covered it great. So one idea that we've been playing with, and I mentioned this, I don't know, probably about a year ago now to Dan and Liz, about when the district went to site-based management, I think they really wanted to do site-based decision-making. And so they put transactional work out into the school buildings that they don't necessarily have the professional training to do. So like the financial management, transactional stuff. We're thinking about how do we re-centralize some of it so that they still have the decision-making power and choice, but we maintain financial compliance in the easier way than we're doing now. So it's just something to think about, kind of brainstorm about, bring some people on the table to think about doing the business differently. So we appreciate ideas. We talked to the leadership team about it a couple weeks ago. We're going to start after the new year starts. We're going to start bringing in people just to kind of think through it a bit as an idea.
And then to kind of bring it full circle too, through the work that we did with our school audits, that was the key observation, is the decentralized nature leads to, I wish I could use a better word, but inconsistencies in the way things are done. And so certain aspects, especially regarding compliance and financials, require that level of consistency. And I think Treasurer Wagner does such a good job describing site-based decision-making versus site-based transactional work. And I think the decision-making, certainly that's the key. But there could really be some benefits to the centralization and the consistency aspect, especially as we come to internal controls and process documentation, so on and so forth.
Okay, well, it's very exciting. I think I'm speaking for everyone else, but I think we are eager to help in more ways than sitting around in a room and talking and being reported to. And so I think I don't think we're looking for anyone to volunteer on the spot right now for any of these initiatives, but certainly if you have interest in any particular one or two or three, if you're really ambitious, you could reach out to myself or Lauren or board member Craig, and we can start getting plugged in on these items.
Yeah. Just one quick thought on that also is that I think this also aligns with a lot of what we heard from the audit committee when we were setting the goals this year around, is that there was a desire to have more of a thing that they could say we helped do, right? We helped accomplish as a committee. And I think this is another way of also thinking about, we've revamped how we do audits in a lot of ways, because we were just recognizing that continuously doing audits of stuff that we're just gonna keep finding the same problems every year didn't make sense. So we revamped how we think about it, how we talk to folks about that. That's something that kind of came out of these discussions. These kind of ideas are things that, Jen and I talked about as part of the feedback from hearing, we need something that the audit committee can help make better. And then this also gets in a little bit to one of the things we did do this year earlier, which is have the explanation to the full board at a board meeting of what the benefits of having an audit team, but also having an audit committee and the work that it's done as part of that. This gets us back to those. I mean, we had a conversation a long time ago about what are the value add, right? Like, what are the things we can demonstrably say, this is how we added value to here. Some of these things are things that if we can get better efficiency in processes and stuff, because folks are saying, look, I do this and this is how it normally is done, may be very helpful for us in a world where we're in a space where the folks may see it and do it in their world and only in their world. And so I think there's a lot of value add from some of that can be demonstrably expressed in a bigger setting.
Okay. Anything else to add, Jen?
Nope, got it covered.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll now move on to the audit committee dashboard from Lauren and her team.
In May, I asked the committee if everyone would like a small update on the district changes as well. Would perhaps a board member want to give that update if folks didn't have the opportunity to see Monday's meeting, or do folks feel pretty attuned to our upcoming changes, if you don't mind me asking?
I would love to hear that, and I'd love to hear from Mr. Lindy.
My apologies. I don't mean to put anyone on the spot. I think we had intended just some additional updates to keep everyone in the loop as well.
Great.
I'm happy to help. Can you just say the question one more time, Lauren?
We just set aside a bit of time to talk about the strategic direction via goal 2 for the audit committee, and then also wanted to provide a brief and consolidated update to our members who maybe haven't had the opportunity to hear of some of the changes going on in the district, trying to keep everyone engaged in the strategy. So I know that is, I don't mean to put anyone on the spot. It's just if it's the desire of the committee to get a brief update.
Yeah, well, we have the superintendent here too. I think it would be a great person to give it. I listen, 5:20 on a Wednesday. I appreciate it. I really do. But I don't know if superintendent or Brandon want to share a little bit.
I mean, I think superintendent probably can share a little bit more in detail, but I'll just quickly say that, we had a series of votes around our phase 2 of the growth plan that was built around the idea of adding more of a middle school presence to some of our schools. And so I guess I will certainly turn it over to superintendent to kind of give a little bit more of the detail and kind of the next stages for what will come from those votes.
Happy to do so. Good afternoon, everyone. So what we have proposed to the board and what was accepted Monday includes several things. There were about 9 items and then 9 bundles of how we would have school based on a corridor model of East, Central, and West schools, and then thinking about programming that we offer as it relates to programming we offer on the West side, for example, International Baccalaureate. How then can we offer it on the East side? The flip of that, on the East side, we offer an early college program. How can we now offer that on the West side of town? And expanding some other programs that we find to be successful and being requested from parents and students, for example, junior ROTC. Also an expansion in our career and technical education area of automotive technologies, of entrepreneurship, and of cosmetology. Those seem to be the ones over the last several years that have been asked for by young people and their parents. In addition to that, Board Member Craig mentioned the creation of middle schools and the expansion of junior high school. So this year, we opened our first junior high school, Schroeder Junior High. And so many of our traditional 9 to 12 buildings next year, 7 to 12 buildings, I apologize, will become 9 to 12 buildings. And so we have a flow of types of buildings in each corridor of the district, starting from early childhood or pre-K, our 3 and 4 year olds, all the way up to elementary school, up to middle school, junior high, and then high school. So it's laid out that way in each of those corridors of the district that I mentioned. In addition to that, some other programming that we find to be in need of in our school district is the ever increasing number of our multi-language learner students. And so we have proposed that we follow the model that we have, for example, at Roberts School on the west side of town with welcome centers for our families and young people, with the goal of making sure our multi-language learners have the things that they need to be prepared and come to school and be successful and feel comfortable entering into our school district. So we've requested an expansion of that and been granted that expansion. And then the other high-level service opportunity for young people is the growing population of our children experiencing homelessness. And so what we want to do is expand the programming that Rebecca Beach and Project Connect provides our community, whether it is clothing, shoes, supplies, book bags, etc. And we want to expand and grow that by perhaps including and creating a laundromat system for our young people, perhaps increasing our food pantry services for our young people. And there are even greater ideas and government entities that we are looking to partner with who have expressed interest, like Hamilton County Job and Family Services. So those wraparound services we are affectionately calling the WRAP in our school district for next school year. So I think that's high level and very broad in terms of what's been approved. Like that?
No, I mean, I think I appreciate the superintendent summary. I think everything is very accurate. I think those are all very good things to do and causes to support, particularly the kids experiencing homelessness, the growing ELL population. And I want us to look to the future with where we're going next. I mean, I think the concerns I had were about it would disrupt about up to 15,000 kids in terms of which schools they attend. And that's more than 2 out of 5 kids in the district. I also wasn't convinced that we had a plan to pay for it. And it depending on what got approved or didn't get approved or how many kids go to the new school they're assigned to, it could it would, I think, most likely increase our expenses over the next couple of years. And for a disruption of that scale, I thought we needed a really strong rationale. And I was concerned that our rationale for the plan kept changing. Yep. Thank you for asking.
Any other questions or comments for the board members or the superintendent? Thank you. Now we'll turn it over to the chief.
Thank you all very
executive.
much. So we'll start with some celebrations. I'll have Mr. Wilson, if you don't mind jumping into the dashboard while we do this. But a really big celebration for our team, Isaac Karn, CPA, has completed CPA exam. And then Ms. Emma Mueller has an update for the committee as well around a couple other exciting celebrations.
Yeah, so I'll kind of start with the dashboard first and then get into mine. The items to review, as always, are linked within the email that you guys are sent. So you're able to see the financial updates from the past few meetings. Those are linked there if you have some extra free time and are super duper interested. The other documents that you have in front of you are linked there as well if you feel like having a digital copy. The upcoming dates are there for you. So I think we've landed on the 2/26 February audit committee meeting. We'll update that once we have final approval. And then for our district and external audits, I'm working with Kevin to update for Plattenberg. And then I also have been sending out a weekly blurb in the newsletter that goes to everyone in central office. So kind of getting what is an external audit, what counts as one, and how you should contact us. The other big news is over the past few months, we've worked on hiring an intern. So we've met a lot of really good candidates. Ultimately, we decided on extending an offer to a student at UC. We're very excited for him to start in January to help us with our continuous auditing. So super fun stuff for him. And he will be extending into summer a bit because I will be going on maternity leave in early May. So I will not be here. Yes. And then I will pass it on to Lauren for some other items.
Yes, it's a big year. So then I'll get married in August. So we've got a big year ahead of us as a team. So we're just adding letters and changing names and all sorts of things over here. So August. I was hoping you wouldn't put 2 and 2 together. No, but from a work standpoint, that's most important. So feedback I think we've gotten around our dashboard is we don't necessarily need to talk you through it every time. However, we have notes. We can talk about any of the projects. We just want to be respectful of everyone's time because the goal is that it's interactive. You can play around. You've got it in front of you, and then we can dig into anything of interest. I will say, big picture, things are going according to plan. We are on target for the windows that we projected to execute the work, as well as when we plan to report on the work. You will see that the majority of our projects, as what typically happens each year, will come through to be presented to the audit committee in the February and April meetings. That's our goal, as I mentioned before, to have all of the projects from the fiscal 25 plan reported on by April. So of course, we can start that transition and risk assessment and planning for fiscal 26 come May. So I think I had another quick note. Yep. So the two reports that'll be shared with you in February are the Records Retention Assurance Project, as well as the Business Plus kind of an IT audit as well. So those are the two that we are anticipating sharing at the February meeting. Of course, you can find at the very end of the dashboard the status pass recommendation. Isaac is continuing to lead that work and is prepared to answer any questions you may have, as well as strong partnership and appreciation to our management teams who take the time and effort to provide those updates to us. So I'll pause there and happy to answer, expand on anything mentioned.
On the history of recommendations, we have 5 in the past due category. I think if I'm not mistaken, we've changed how we've put the due dates on those so that not everything is past due. It's the ones that have established a due date and then have gone past that due date. Can you give any additional commentary if there's any action that we need to take as a committee to get the board to look at these closely?
Yeah, so I'll just provide a quick reminder. The past due items directly relate to recommendations that management said would be done by a certain date. And now the date has passed that and it's still not complete. So I believe the recommendations were due to the internal audit team right at the end of November. And so there were a few 5 items or 5 recommendations that had November 1 or sometime in November dates that they had anticipated on completing them, and each of the areas kind of encountered their own setbacks and kind of pushed that date back now. And so those are the ones that now are reflected as past due. I will say all of them, for the most part, are reporting as like 90% there. And so they do anticipate those being complete come February when we meet again.
Okay, thank you.
I think, since I was looking at that too, what's concerning is the departments that are past due are typically the departments that have issues, like our benefits department has had issues and we've not seen a lot of movement with those issues. And then the P card is one that I would be concerned about at this point in time, that they remain past due. And those are some areas that have been areas of question over the last several years. And so for benefits not to have completed on time, to me, is unacceptable. And so is there a way we can get them in to give us an update?
Yeah, we can certainly or coordinate a time for them to come in and update. When we initially were rolling out this past due plan, a lot of other research that we were doing mandated it. So if it goes past due, management is required to come in and kind of explain why. We didn't want to push that on management this first time,
Okay.
kind of introducing it. However, benefits did roll out or go through open enrollment with the district in November. And I think our team, when we first saw the estimated dates that management was providing, we didn't want to kind of overstep and say, whoa, this is really ambitious of you all, because we kind of have been working with management. And so we let them use those dates and they're kind of sticking to them. I will say for benefits, the benefit focus vendor and platform that they're kind of transitioning to is going live January 1, so at the beginning of the calendar year.
Okay.
And so they are hoping that that will
Mhm.
address some of those
Okay.
setbacks, as well as the P card work. They also are transitioning to a Business Plus module that is going to house all of the P card statements, the card statements, and all of the supporting documents. And so I think that one specifically is going to kind of group a lot of the recommendations for that area.
Okay.
Yeah, our Isaac's done such a great job following up on this, and the management teams have been incredibly responsive. And I think our thought process is we're in status of past Recs project version 2, version 3, and maybe 2B, I might even say sooner rather than later, is what is the escalation. So the escalation that was taken this time is really just to work with the folks who are giving those updates. We're all learning how to do this, and we're just really appreciative that people are keeping us informed. So Isaac went ahead and did a gut check. That seems reasonable. We understand where we are, and I don't think there's a cause for an alarm. However, we may consider in working with management some escalation procedures to say, okay, after your 30, 60, 90 days, perhaps we need to have some further discussion. So we're trying to start a little bit softer, if you will, just because we're all new. However, as we all get more comfortable with this process, get more comfort about setting dates and what's reasonable, it's a tricky thing to foresee sometimes, as reality always is a little different than what we plan and anticipate. So I would say management's participation and focus on this is no cause for concern from our standpoint, because it is taken very seriously. So, and I shouldn't just speak, we of course have our treasurer, assistant treasurer, and superintendent in the room as well. But from an audit standpoint, objective standpoint, we are very pleased with how this is going.
So Lauren, do you mind if I make a comment?
Please.
So one of the things that we put into practice, because it's so easy to lose the recommendations in the busyness of what happens every day. We added 2 things. One is we have a monthly review where against the recommendations and everybody reports out their progress. And then we actually had them write into their goals that they're evaluated on some of those recommendations. So it make it a higher priority for individual employees to work together. So we're actually seeing a lot more progress as well. And Mike has been leading this and doing a great job.
I love that. Thank you. And I might say her role needs to shrink for whoever is going to take her, or you're not going to keep them.
I just wanted a follow-up question on that. You see one of the, there's 2 benefit audits that are on there, the benefits and then follow-up. And you said the institution of the new system going live on Gen 1 will correct most of what you perceive as the risk that's outstanding, or correct the issues. Is that on both projects or on one of the projects? Because I would be concerned that if those ones from 2020 aren't corrected sooner rather than later, I mean, you're now going to be 5 years out. That would be, well, we may be having people work together. 5 years to correct an issue, I would think most would say that's not acceptable in most industries.
Yeah, I'll start, and Isaac's, I think, been involved in the organization, so he may be able to speak how we categorize them, but I do believe this solution is targeted at all of the benefits recommendations. And when we did the follow-up, it was kind of a re-up of everything, if you will. So the one that might be correlated with 2020, what could have been initially I believe was initially issued then, but really reissued, revisited, and now this new solution addresses it at the same time. Is that correct, Isaac? They've kind of now all, we refer to it as 2020, but realistically, this solution is targeting the whole batch of them, if that makes sense. So management's belief and take on this is that this new system will be targeted at the risks that were identified, the findings that we had, and it should improve that. And our goal is then to work with the team once implemented to do some testing to verify that.
And then new systems introduce new risk. So have you been sitting alongside determining what those new risks may be so that we get ahead of those risks and putting some processes in place to make sure that, there's no exposure.
So we were not invited to those conversations, but we did request the SOC report and I did receive that. So part of the meetings we initially had in the summer was reviewing that. Granted, we have an old SOC report, so I don't know what the new SOC report would look like or what those risks would be with CPS. But I know they were also working with ITM and financial technology, so I'm assuming some of those discussions were with them as well.
Any other questions or comments for Lauren and her team?
I just have a small comment on the dashboard. The items for review, I really, really, really appreciated the board meeting links being like time stamped to the relevant discussion, because those meetings are very long and it's hard to find stuff in them. And I would love to see like even more of those, if there's anything that feels relevant, even if it's not maybe finance or, audit specific, if there are some like general board discussions that you think might be helpful, it would be so helpful to have a few more of those. I would be happy to watch more of those, with those timestamps. I love that.
All right. Hearing no other comments, we'll move on to Lauren's mid-year evaluation.
Yes, thank you. So along the same approach, I requested and I hope you had the opportunity to review the memo that I drafted. For those who maybe have not seen the memo and for the public's context, I provide a memo and prompt for the audit committee twice a year for my mid-year evaluation, which takes place now in December, as well as for my annual review, which we typically execute at the April meeting. The memo itself provides background and context regarding the evaluation process, citing the board policy and internal audit charter that allocates the responsibility to the audit committee for my evaluation and gives them the authority to do so. You also find the background and context, so to speak, for how the evaluation process works. I am evaluated in the same manner as our CAS, our administrative union. We utilize their structure and the definitions for each of the terms, as well as the ratings are all explained in detail. And of course, finally, at the end, I note my initial goals, as well as some tangible tasks and actions I've taken to lead towards the progress and the rating that I have provided in my self-evaluation. So the final page, page 7 of 8, is the audit committee chair evaluation form. And the request for today is that you provide your feedback to Chair Holthouse via the executive session. He will complete this form and submit it to Travis Rowley, part of our HR talent team, by December 20th, and that will complete the process. And I also appreciate the time that you all take to provide this feedback. We really do our best to put it into action. It gives us new, fresh ideas, and helps make sure that we're progressing as expected and hopefully beyond. And I'm happy to answer any questions or expand if you would like.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. So the intent here is to recess into executive session. We'll go through the rules of that here in a moment, but then we'll exit executive session and not come back to the public meeting. So I first need a motion to enter executive session to discuss the employment of a public employee or official. And I need a second.
Second.
And then we need to do roll call vote.
Dan Holthouse,
Yes.
Liz Guttridge,
Yeah.
David Foote,
Yes.
Kevin Hoffman,
Yes.
Paul Kitzmiller,
Yes.
Carol Mitchell Lawrence,
Yes.
Brandon Craig,
Yes.
Ben Lindy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Correct.